Good evening and welcome to this week's Lawnside Chat. Tonight I am at the house of Andy Kelleher. Andy is a longtime member of Concordia Lutheran Church. Actually, she was on the call committee that when I was called to be the pastor of Concordia. She's been a Sunday school teacher. She sings in the choir. So thankful for her faithful service to the church and the way that she has cared for me and my family in our time at Concordia. Andy has two adult children, Daniel and Caitlin. One of the things I love about being a pastor is just that I get to watch kids grow up, and I'm always in awe of what great human beings Daniel and Caitlin have become. Smart, compassionate, fun, dedicated. What a great family. I just want to thank them for hosting me tonight. This upcoming Sunday is a Reformation Sunday, and for those who are not Lutheran, every year we celebrate the anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. It was started on August 31st, 1517, when an Augustinian monk named Martin Luther posted 95 theses on the door of the Wittenberg Chapel in Wittenberg, Germany. Those 95 theses were a scholarly paper against the sales of indulgences. Indulgences were a common practice. The sale of indulgences were a common practice in Luther's day. You could buy an indulgence that would get you out of purgatory early. Luther thought that it was an abuse of power and spoke up. What is amazing about all of this is that it was one person who changed not only the church, but the whole world. And tonight I want to talk about one of my favorite things that Luther talked about. It happened in 1518 in what is called the Heidelberg Disputation. Luther was invited to Heidelberg, Germany to give a lecture at the university. And what he said at that lecture confounded and amazed those in attendance. Luther talked about the paradox of God, that God is actually found in what is contrary to human reason. God is not found in glory, but in suffering, and those things we think are useless. Here is what he said at the Heidelberg Disputation. That person does not deserve to be called a theologian who looks upon the invisible things of God as though they were clearly perceptible in those things that have happened. He deserves to be called a theologian, however, who comprehends the visible and manifest things of God seen through the suffering and the cross. A theologian of glory calls evil good and good evil. A theologian of the cross calls a thing what it is. That wisdom that sees the invisible things of God and works as perceived by man is completely puffed up, blinded, and hardened. The things, in other words, the things that we know about God are revealed to us in Jesus' death and resurrection. And outside of that, we know nothing about God. So what does this mean? How does this reorientate our thinking about God? Well, let us think about our current situation. We don't know the purpose or God's purpose or anything behind COVID-19. And anybody who says that they do, they're just guessing because it is an invisible thing of God. Anyone who says that this is a test or a punishment for something we did, or says that God is trying to teach us a lesson, is looking upon the invisible things of God as if they were perceptible. They're being a theologian of glory. They only see people in two categories, winning or losing, and they're keeping score. They are thinking that God works in the way in which they would work. Instead, what we know about God is that God is found in the suffering of the world. Where God is in this pandemic, it is in those who have lost their loved ones and who couldn't go visit them in the hospital. It is in those who have lost their jobs. It is in those who have lost their businesses. It is in those who are now homeless. It is those who are suffering from anxiety. God is found on the cross. God is the places in our lives where we suffer, where there is injustice, where people are broken, where people find no hope. That is where God really lives. Luther has given us a great gift here because it stops us from having to live a perfect dream and helps us to name things for what they are. We can say this pandemic sucks. We don't have to pretend that there's some silver lining. We can name our pain, our anguish, without having to add on some happy thought modifier. We can tell the truth about the world where we live in our human condition. What Luther was objecting to was the idea that human beings could somehow will themselves to better lives, That all we need to do is work harder or try more. That if we were just smart enough, we could think our way out of anything. Or if we work hard enough, we can make it all go away. Luther was trying to help us to give up the idea that we can somehow control everything. We know this because Jesus died on a cross. If there was anyone who could have avoided the hard things of life, it would have been God's Son. Jesus was certainly smart enough not to get killed. He could have controlled everything. What Jesus did instead was trust God. Trust in the Heavenly Parent that God's will was greater than his. And that's what we're called to do in this moment. We are called to trust. We can't simply outthink our current situation. We can't make it go away or stop. All we can do is trust God that is in it somehow. And I actually find that very freeing, because it means that the fate of the world doesn't depend upon me. It's in the hands of God. I don't have to guess about God's involvement. I know that God is in all human things. St. Paul said that this is the foolishness of God, for the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. It is foolish to believe in the midst of the worst things God is at work somehow. It is foolish to believe that God is not in the greatness of life, but in the worst parts of it. It's foolish to think that God's power comes from death. But that's the message of the cross. And for me, it's good news. Because I'm tired of trying to guess. Tired of trying to put all the pieces together. I'm glad that I can just give it to God and not worry. And instead, what I can concentrate on, what I can worry about, is loving my neighbor. I can worry about those in the world that really need to hear that God is with them amidst the worst tragedies of life. I can stop trying to live up to everyone else's standards and simply live in God's grace. As Luther said at the Heidelberg Disputation, the law says do this and it's never done. Grace says believe this and everything is already done. That is what we do. That is what we do. We believe in God's grace. And everything else will take care of itself. No need for guessing. Just some things I've been thinking about this week. I hope it helps you some way spiritually this week. Thanks again to Andy Kelleher for hosting me. And until next week, may God continue to bless you.